welcome to Two Boomer Women. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. I've been talking with Boomer women for almost a decade now. Well, I guess I've been talking to Boomer women all my adult life. Reinventing myself several times along the way, though, but always focused on us, Boomer women. With this incarnation of Two Boomer Women, I'll be interviewing other women who have a message of interest for our demographic. If you want to hear about or learn about something specific, let me know and I'll find someone who understands us to talk about it. There's a contact page at twoboomerwomen.com. If you want to be a guest on Two Boomer Women, bring it on. There's an application form at the website too. Finally, this show is all about conversation. We women know its value. We know how to do it, and we must perpetuate the art form. So let's get started with today's show. Welcome to the Two Boomer Women podcast. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. Do you ever meet someone, and I use the word meet loosely in this day and age, maybe it's their website, maybe a YouTube video, and you wish you could meet them in real time and have their calm rub off on you? My guest this week has been practicing meditation and mindfulness for over 40 years. She views stress as like clouds in the sky. She explains the sun of happiness is always shining deep within our own heart, but it can be eclipsed by the storm clouds of stress and distress, which are so often assailing us from the world outside. DurgaMata Chaudhry, welcome to the Two Boomer Women podcast. When we were emailing, you told me my business is to raise the consciousness of the world, which basically translate as create more smiles and fewer tears. Now, that's lovely, especially when we consider the many issues in the news right now. More smiles is so needed. This has been a spiritual journey for you. Could you tell our listeners about your path?
Yes, it's difficult to know where to start because it's such a fascinating story and it goes back a long way. It actually goes back to the end of the World War II. Both my parents were pacifists and they were individually keen to do something positive to make a difference to all the devastation that had been going on. And they met in Germany on the International Voluntary Service for Peace program, where they were working with displaced people from Poland the borders had been redrawn. So we grew up in a family. My mother's family were farmers and my dad worked for her father for a while and then got his own farm. So we grew up on a small family farm where you stepped out of the door into peace and beauty, unlike city kids. Of course, I never realized it was different. And we grew up within the Quaker church because both my parents had come across the Quakers with their great pacifist traditions. And we grew up, I guess, in an unusually conscious, unusually aware kind of family where it was quite international. We often had visitors from other places. And there was always some depth to the conversation. After that, I went to university. I got involved with the Quakers, the young Quakers in the city I was in. I was in Birmingham. And my big hobby was canoeing. And I'd had a canoe for some years and I was quite strong. And so we were training for the Whitewater Championships. And a couple of years went by. I think it was only one after the first year. And we were coming up in the summer in June for the first of the canoe races, canoe competitions. So I was hitchhiking as, students traveled all over the world to hitchhiking when we were young. And I met a guy who was hitchhiking not to Wales, where I was going for my canoe race, but up to Glasgow in Scotland to meet his guru. And I thought, oh my God, I had no idea what a guru was. I'd never really heard the word. And I didn't like this guy at all. I thought he was probably a hippie, which I'd heard of. I hadn't met any. And I thought he was probably quite dangerous. And I was annoyed that he'd come and run up and jumped into the car that had stopped for me. I hadn't gone very far, trying to look out the window and not even listen to all that he was going on about meditation and guru and this and that. And I suddenly heard my own voice say, I'm coming with you. And I had such a shock. And it was almost as though there was an argument going inside my mind. And my mind was responding by saying, what the are you thinking of? And something very deep-seated inside me said, it's all right, you'll see. And my mind stopped questioning or thinking for the rest of the day. Never thought about my canoe race that I'd been training for, or the team that I was supposed to be competing with. I just went up to Glasgow, and we finally managed to meet up with the community that he was trying to track down. And they said, oh, it's too late now. They'd been out in the hills having a picnic and enjoying the hills in the day. They said, he's gone back to his hotel. You know, it's too late. And I was just adamant. I said, I'm sorry, we've come all this way. We have to see him. And eventually the centre head took us to the hotel where he was staying, really just to shut me up and get rid of me. I was quite sure that this illustrious guru wouldn't have any time for seeing people at that time of night. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night by then. And I was asked to sit in the lounge of the hotel bar while they went up to find out. And suddenly my mind came back as though I'd got a slap. I'd never been in a bar before. We were totally teetotal in our family. What the heck am I doing here? And what's a guru anyway? And I was literally on the cusp of walking out the door fast when they came back down with smiles on their faces and said, yes, he'll see you. So I followed them. By now my mind was in all turmoil, and I was quite scared. And I followed them up their corridors and staircases up to this little room, and they opened the door, and I stepped inside and saw this gentleman for the first time. And there was such a sense of recognition, homecoming, peace, absolute joy. It was emotionally astonishing. And I kind of stood there feeling very, very shy and not knowing what to do with myself. And the guy said, you know, who was I? I said, I'm a Quaker from Birmingham, and I just wanted to meet you. And he said, he said some nice things about the Quakers. And then he said, whatever religion you belong to, if you want to know God personally, you need to have a key. And I can be a key for some people. And all this was kind of a bit of a shock. And then he asked me to stand at the foot of the bed and meditate. Well, I didn't know what is meditate. I kind of folded my hands like a little kid in school and closed my eyes. And he said, no, just relax. Look at my face. And his eyes started to move in a way I'd never, ever seen anybody's move. And I thought, I don't know how to do that. And then he just took me into heaven. And all I can say is wherever we were, it was just bliss. And at one point, my mind said, he and I are 1,000,000 miles above everybody else in the world. And then a little voice in my mind said, you shouldn't think like that. That's not humble. That's not correct. You shouldn't think you're better than other people. And that was the last thought I had after that. It was just literally bliss. And after God knows how long, he folded his hands and bowed quite deeply. And I thought, that's what I must do. So I did the same. And I've later learned that, you know, he's a God-realized master, and he sees and experiences God at every moment in everything. And when he bows like that, he's actually bowing to God. He's seeing the divine in you, which is quite an interesting concept when you stop to think about it. And that was how I met him, and I've been his student ever since. I didn't know at that moment, that time, that it would change my life. When I came to reflect on it, because I knew nothing about any other religion, I thought it was the second coming of Christ, because nobody else could give you that kind of sense of being in heaven. You know, a little bit along the way, I've learned a bit about different religions, and that there are such things as God-realized masters, few and far between, but it's like having the most incredibly powerful coach on your side in life. And his path is quite strict. He expects you to meditate every day, ideally at 6 o'clock in the morning, sing every day. He's written over 20,000 songs. Read his books every day to stay in his consciousness. He's written over 1,000 books. They're all free online, so anybody can just go to his website, to the library, and get inspiration from whatever he's written. And the other thing that I've noticed, because I was inspired to go on to study religion and teach religious education, is that he was amazingly accessible. Most of the great yogis live, in a mountain hermitage somewhere, or maybe appear to their devotees once every month or something like that. But he was incredibly creatively active. He was an artist, he was a musician, he was a composer, and he was dedicated to world peace. And everything he did was devoted to peace. He gave over 500 free peace concerts around the world. And if there was a peace concert coming up in your neck of the woods, anywhere in Europe, we'd just save up and go there. And we'd have, the community sense of it all getting together to help put on the concert, because they were always done free. And I dropped out of uni when I first got married. Thought it was a very silly idea to think I needed a degree. Very Indian and very stupid. My role is to support my husband with whatever he's doing. But I actually worked as a cleaner for some years in a hotel. And so I was always part of the cleaning crew before the concerts, which I loved. Just being able to, when we talk about raising consciousness, it's like removing the dirt. It's like letting the light shine through. So cleaning for me is a very practical thing, a very inspiring thing, joyful thing, especially when you're doing it with other people. And basically, he was an athlete in his youth. He was at the Pondicherry ashram in his childhood, and he was a decathlete and a sprint champion. And he believes in the balance, always balancing the life, the physical and the spiritual, so that 2 miles running a day is kind of as important as your meditation. And if you aren't fit enough to do that, just walk for a mile, which I try and do. This last year, it's gone out the window because my focus was so much on my business. But I know it's important. And it's a little bit like you were saying in the introduction about your choices. If we know something's important, we can choose to do it. And I know that being fit is important. And I know that I've neglected it. So this year, I've started doing a thing called habit stacking, which is linking something you want to do more with something you do a lot. And there's a guy who runs a Zoom call called No More Bad Zoom to train people in Zoom. And he mentioned that he was doing this habit stacking. And every time he brushes his teeth, he does 50 squats. So he's doing 100 squats a day. Well, around there, I heard about that around about Christmas. And I thought, well, I don't want to link it to brushing my teeth, but I have plenty of cups of tea during the day. And every time I boil the kettle, I'll do 10 squats. And when I started, I could barely do 10. I was having to hold the floor, hold on to things. And I'm now up to 50.
Oh, my goodness.
And also my weight went badly up. Back in 2004, I was quite seriously ill and lost a lot of weight. And I was staying with my mum, and she was kind of looking after me as I was convalescing. And she just fed me up. Well, before 2004, I was running 2 miles a day and I was doing triathlons. After that illness, I put on weight, but it was all fat. It wasn't muscle. And just 2 days ago, I've got my weight back to what it was in 2004 for the first time. And it's like having this focus on my health matters, my physical health matters as much as my spiritual health. And I would say, if you're asking what sort of path it is, it's that kind of path where everything feeds together. It's very diverse. And there's some corner of it where you're going to feel happy. If you're an artist, there's art in it. If you're a musician, there's music in it. If you're an athlete, there's sport in it. And if you just like sitting quietly and having a smile on your face, that's okay as well. The meditation's the kind of drumbeat at the heart of it. Because when you meditate, your mind is quiet and you just receive. He says that when you pray, you talk to God. When you meditate, you listen to God, and God speaks. So that when you pray, you're thinking, I need this, or I would like that, or can that happen? Or can you help me with this? But when you meditate, you just say, I'm yours. I'm open. Whatever it is that I need, you can see it. And it's incredibly nourishing. And if you've had a good meditation, you've just got to smile. It's kind of embarrassing. It's almost like you're drunk. Children would say to me in the corridor, Miss, what are you high on? I'd say, what am I high on? Your faces, the divine shining through your eyes. What, me, miss?
Oh, that's great. What an amazing story. I don't know what to ask next. So I'm going to backtrack a wee bit. Well, first of all, I've got to say I heard a collective groan of listeners when you said you just returned to your weight, because the rest of us are dealing with the COVID-19. We've all gained
It is. Yeah.
those
Yeah.
19.
It went up all the way through COVID up to Christmas when I learned about the habit stacking in the squat.
Oh, okay. So now I feel a bit better. Okay.
I've been struggling with it since 2004. And I, first of all, was just trying to eat healthy and not have sugar and, do all the things that don't help, like watch your portion sizes and not eat late night and things like that. But it wasn't working. And then round about 2016, my son sent me a link to a program where somebody looked into different ways of dieting. And one of them was the 5-2-5, where 2 days a week you do a 16-hour fast. And a 16-hour fast is not difficult because you just stop eating around about 7 o'clock at night and then you start eating next day at lunchtime. So I did the 2-5 and my weight went back down below 11 stone, which was really scaring me to be that heavy. And it kind of got stuck round about 10 and a half, I suppose, between 10 and a half and 11 stone. I don't know if you know stones, but they're kind of
14 pound.
You can work with them. But then it was just coasting. And then the beginning of this year, I just thought, I'm going to do this habit stacking. I must get my health back, because when you're in your 60s, you can't mess about. If you don't focus and get your health back, it's not going to get back. So I had that kind of conscious choice and determination to get fit enough to do jogging again, because I haven't been able to run for years now. And I used to love running. And now I'll go for a walk and maybe do a few yards of jogging, and that's enough. So I figured if I do the squats, I'll get the muscles that I need for jogging back. And then I just figured I'm staying with my son at the moment, and he's got really good electronic scales. So the first thing in the morning, I go to the bathroom and then I stand on the scales just in bra and pants. And if my weight is higher than it was the day before, I think, when did I eat last night? And I count 16 hours and I do the 16-hour fast. Okay. So I'm actually doing the 16-hour fast several times a week. I'm not just doing it twice a week like I was. And slowly and gradually, I've seen my weight coming down, and I've not even felt hungry. And if I have felt a little bit hungry, I know what I'm eating in 2 hours' time or whatever it is. And I'm pleased I feel hungry, because that means some little man inside my body is shoveling the coal out of the fat cells. I'm really excited to be back to 9.5 stone. Today it was 9 stone 10.3, which is only a couple of pounds over. And so I did a 16-hour today because it had gone up from yesterday. And it's just so simple. And you don't have to have a special diet. You don't have to buy special food in. I do keep away from sugar as much as I possibly can, because I know it's actually harmful to you. I try and drink water, but I don't like water very much. It's very chemically in England. So I tend to put a bit of fruit juice in it just to make it taste nice. And I know that it's important to be hydrated. So I guess I'm working on kind of the 16-hour diet, the squats, and exercise, at least 1 mile a day of exercise, and the hydration. And it's having an effect.
Yay.
We have to be our instrument of our own future and our own life. Our happiness is our business. It's not somebody else's business. We have to take it seriously, because otherwise there's a very good chance we won't be happy. And it's the same with fitness. If we don't look at it after it now, it's not going to get better in the future. And my mum was a great example, because she climbed Ben Nevis, which is the highest mountain in Britain, to celebrate being 80 years old. And its name means the god of winter, and people die on that mountain. It's not an easy mountain to climb. And I kind of think, I think I'm going to climb it when I'm 70, because I don't know if I'd manage when I'm 80. But, it's like it comes down to attitude, a lot of it, and if you can take mindfulness seriously, positivity seriously. Be aware of your own thoughts and what they're doing to you, where you're going with them. It's like being the commander. Are you the commander of your life, or is somebody else like one of these beings inside your mind that's quite negative? Are they the commander of your mind? And once you're aware of that, your mind starts to fight it for yourself. You know, your mind will flag up, hey, you can't, that's not a good thing to think. Or can you reword that, please? I tend to say stupid when I've done something stupid, but I try not to say, oh, I'm stupid. I just say, oh, stupid.
Yeah, I'm loving talking to you because I've done enough podcasts now that I'm going like, oh, that part reminds me of this other guest. And so many of my guests have these little commonalities that I want to draw a wall chart. And
oh, how lovely.
So cool. Yeah. I want to go back to your journey for a moment.
Yep. Sure.
So you leave Glasgow.
Yep.
And you've discovered meditation.
Yep.
Did it become naturally to you then, or did you follow up with training and community?
Basically, we have group meditation every week. And if you're on our spiritual teacher's path, he expects you to go regularly. And I was living in Birmingham. The nearest centre was London. Unfortunately, as a student, we had a free afternoon on a Wednesday for our own study. So I just used to get the train up to London. And I could tell you so many funny stories. I'll get distracted by memories. But I had a lot of fear going to the London centre because I didn't know what meditation was. And when I got to the door, the only thing that I could think was they've got nice roses in the garden. I grew up on a farm with, beautiful garden. My mum was a great gardener. And I liked the roses, so I felt a little less scared knocking on the door. And then these guys came to the door in basically cricket whites. I'm not used to seeing men wearing white. It's like, how peculiar. And welcomed me. They knew about me, they'd heard about me. And invited me, and they said, we leave our shoes here. And I was like, you what? Why should I take my shoes off? And I didn't. I was just rude. I didn't take them off. It's like, why should I take my shoes off? And we went in the kitchen and someone said, would you like a cup of tea? And I just traveled a long way from Birmingham. I was tired. Oh, I'd love a cup of tea. They gave me this cup with green fluid in it. I had no connections with anything to do with the hippie world. A lot of the guys in there were ex-hippies. And I just thought it was drugs. It was actually peppermint tea, So when nobody was watching, I just tipped it down the drain. I wasn't even putting it near my mouth.
Oh, no.
And then after a while, I kind of relaxed enough to think, well, nobody here's got their shoes on. And I feel a bit silly that I've got mine on still. So I went to the door where they'd got the shoe shelves and I took my shoes off. And there was a photograph there of my spiritual teacher with such a smile. That was my connection. I'd met him and I knew I wanted to be under his guidance. I belonged there. And I just kind of stood there and looked at it for a while and relaxed some of the tension I was feeling. And then they invited me, this is right, we're going to meditate now, opened the door to a large room with a deep blue carpet and no furniture. And I thought, a few cushions scattered around, very strange smell. And I thought, I don't know what goes on in here, but I don't want to know what goes on in here. So I kind of turned around and said, I don't think I'll meditate today, thank you. It's very nice, but maybe another time. And somebody said, would you like to use the library? So I said, oh, yes. And the library was the cupboard under the stairs, very small, bookshelves on either side and a comfortable chair. So I sat on the chair and kind of reached out for a book. And just then there was a weird noise. And somebody in the kitchen, when we'd been having cups of tea beforehand, had said something about good vibrations, which I kind of thought was probably hippie talk, and I didn't know what it was about. But I thought, oh, my God, that must be the vibrations, this weird noise. So I leapt off the chair like a scalded rabbit, ran for the door. And as I passed the kitchen, I saw that the kettle was boiling. And it was one of these ones that sits on the hob and it goes, wow, 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 wow. And I thought, if I'm scared of a kettle, I need to just go back to the reading room and calm down a bit. So I reached out for a book and opened it. And on the first page, it said something about people are different and paths are different, but the differences don't matter. We have to be true to our own soul or spirit and follow its guidance. And whatever way we love God is right for us. And that was kind of intellectually incredibly important for me because I'd been living in Northern Ireland before I went to university, where the Catholics and the Protestants weren't getting on particularly well. And they both thought they were right. And there were hardly any Quakers. So I'd been going to lots of different churches and finding out about different denominations. And they all told you what they believed and what you had to believe. This is the creed. This is our belief. And the others are all wrong, of course. And this was the first time that anybody had ever said, follow your heart and soul. Don't worry if there are differences. What matters is your love of God and God's relationship with you. And it was from weeks and weeks, I would just go there and sit in the library and read before I found out that actually all they do in that room is sit on the floor. And then when I started to meditate and sit on the floor, we had silent meditation for an hour. And I wasn't used to sitting on the floor and my legs would get cramp. So I used to sit on the floor for a lot longer. When everybody else went back to the kitchen to have a cuppa, I would be trying to unlock my cramped legs. And that was when I really felt my spiritual teacher's power and presence just healing me, lifting me, taking me into his own meditation as he had done when I met him at the hotel. And you kind of learn meditation from a master through your meditation because everybody's different and they've all got their own way, but he's got the capacity to actually be there and secretly, silently teach your soul how to do it. And basically, his teaching is first to concentrate. So you look at the petal of a flower or you look at the face of a spiritual master, anything that's got pure consciousness. And people say, oh, you're worshipping your man. The guru is your God. No, he's not. It's like you look at anything and it affects your consciousness, which is why advertisers use pretty women to try and sell cars. That will make the man feel attracted to, by association, to the product. And you look at you want to raise your consciousness, you want to be in a spiritual consciousness. Look at a saint who is in a spiritual consciousness. Look at a master who is totally united with God in that consciousness. There is nothing undivine when you look at a spiritual master's photograph. Where they're in deep meditation, you're sort of identifying with that and instinctively it's lifting your consciousness. It's nothing to do with worship of any sort. It's just to do with practicalities. And obviously he's written and answered questions on everything under the sun. So you read his books and a lot of things start to make sense. And there are a lot of exercises. I find that for me, the breathing exercises are very important. They're not systematic pranayama, which is where you breathe with one nostril or a certain rhythm. But he recommends that you imagine, for example, that you're breathing God's breath. And God's breath is filling you and flowing through you. And almost like a blood transfusion when I do it, it's washing away everything that's undivine. And as you exhale, you breathe out at God's feet. So all the rubbish and anything that was undivine comes out and just washes to the feet of God. And then you breathe in his breath and you breathe out all your impurities, if you like. And if you do that, just like visualize that, it's so powerful. Another one is you breathe in pure peace and you breathe out all your restless thoughts. And on one occasion, I thought, this was probably 20 years ago, I'm just going to do the breathing for, I think, 3 or 4 routine rhythms of breathing in and breathing out with focus, breathing in peace, breathing out thoughts. It took me half an hour and I still hadn't done it. because all the thoughts kept popping in. But now I can do it easily because I've been practicing it for years, so you see your own progress, and it's just joyful. And basically his path is very much, we're in this world and we find God in this world. You can't renounce God. You can't renounce things to find God because God's in everything. So you take your life situations as spiritual discipline and your opportunities to serve God in the people you work with or the people you meet in the street, or, it shouldn't be separate. So, yeah, it's fascinating. I could talk all night.
What I find fascinating is where you started with maybe some fear, distrust, concern, definitely uncomfortableness, but something within you knew that you had to keep going. And
yeah, I mean, I have to believe in reincarnation because when I met my spiritual teacher, it was just stunning that I knew him. And though it was on such a deeper level than any questions or thoughts might be, there was no arguments. I'm his kid. He's my master. It's just fact, reality. And I mean, anything that I've ever questioned over the years that I've been unsure that he was, maybe wanted to argue about, it's proved he's right. And that kind of leads to another thing that I know you wanted to ask me about, was how I came to work in health and well-being after being teacher for many years. And that came about because I was a head of department back in 2008, and our school had a rebuild and messed up the funds, got in trouble for money. So they decided to make one afternoon into enrichment, where they could bring hobbies and volunteers in to teach hobbies. But they took all the timetable from my subject. I was head of RE, religious education. So from going from extremely good results with all our exam classes, only because the kids loved it, they were interested, we were excited about it, we conveyed that kind of enthusiasm and the wonder of it, that why are we alive? Why is there a universe? What do we mean by this concept of God? What is a human being? What's it mean to be me? My experiences matter in this subject. My thoughts, my beliefs, my arguments matter. You don't only study other people's beliefs, you look at your own as well. And suddenly they stopped all our exam classes and we were reduced to once a fortnight, which is basically telling the children that this subject is not important and you don't have to bother with it. And my colleague and I resigned. I didn't have enough life experience or nous to realize that when you've resigned from a school, other schools are going to view you with a lot of suspicion. And I never got back into a proper job again, teaching my beloved subject. I went through a period of intense depression and stress. I applied for over 200 jobs before I gave up and realized I'm not going to get one. And I had to go sideways into doing special needs work at college with learning support, part-time. So I lost hugely financially. I always joke, we have a politician called, I better not give his name, but he came in as the education secretary and he changed the way that schools are compared and league tables judge them. And it didn't include our subject. So schools just dropped it. They stopped teaching exam because if kids volunteered to take our subject, they wouldn't be taking a subject which they would get credit for. And it was just incredibly frustrating. And I always joke that the only reason he's walking around still is because I'm a pacifist. But it forced me to look at stress and depression. And I kind of felt I'm studying them from the inside. And I also was aware of the amount of stress and depression that's in the world and how debilitating and disabling it is. There was a day when I went into my son's room, and his room was very much like a meditation room. He also practiced meditation, and it had a nice blue carpet, and, it's all very sweet and pure. And I was in there for some reason, and I just went on my knees and I just said, what's the matter? Am I on the scrap heap now? Doesn't my experience count for anything? Have you got no more work for me? You know, I was just really upset about not being able to get work. And I sometimes get immediate answers. My spiritual teacher is quite capable of, you know, actually speaking aloud when you're in a difficult situation and need it. He didn't do that, but over the next few days, he started telling me things, and I was arguing with him. And the first one was, you're very good at getting kids through the exams, but it's not helping you learn anything anymore. And I had a huge argument with that, because I'm sure you appreciate yourself, you're never good enough. I wanted all my students to do well. I wanted to get on with all my students. I mean, the whole basis of spirituality is about love and self-giving and feeling that sense of oneness and connection with everything and everybody. And there were some students I found it very difficult to. There were some who disliked me intensely. There were some who wouldn't cooperate. I wasn't happy at all to have situations where my classroom was a happy place. And we had a lot of fun in my lessons, but it wasn't with everybody. And I had a big argument with him that, you know, it wasn't true that I had nothing still to learn. And then a few weeks later, I had a very clear message, which was I came into the world to bring peace, not to add more stress. And I had a huge argument because the kids love me. They come up at lunchtime. They stop me in the street. I don't give them stress. But in my program, there are one or two things that we have to do before we start the 7 steps. And one of these is the 3 A's. And one of the A's is acceptance. You have to be able to look clearly at what's real and accept what's real. Because if you don't, it's like having the wrong diagnosis. You can't take the right medicine. And I wasn't accepting that I was adding to stress. I thought I was the bee's knees and everybody loved me, which was nearly true for the kids. But I had so many issues with senior management in many schools over the years, not just one. And I could realize that schools are stressful places. And if you work in a stressful place, you're contributing to the stress, however clever you are, however well you think you manage things. You know, I mean, there were certain things schools have to these days they have what they call data-driven learning. Well, I grew up in an era where we didn't bother with data. And I believe in enthusiasm learning. If the kids are enthusiastic, if they love my subject, they will work on it. I don't need to keep the data. The data shows itself in the exams. They've done well, you know. We were always in the top 3 for value added, which is, you know, how well your subject is teaching compared with what the school would have expected the kids to do. And for me, the idea of working out every term what level your children are working at in a subject like religious education is ridiculous. You can't measure it. It's not something that's quantifiable. And I used to say to the senior management, I'm planting seeds. My job is to plant seeds. Whether they germinate and when they germinate is not my business. And of course, that didn't go down particularly well. So I just used to fudge the records. You know, I wasn't wasting my time on creating something that isn't going to help my kids learn. You know, but as I say, I was probably a bit of a pain to senior management. I loved the kids. I loved my subject. They did well in it. But I had to realize, this is a stressful world. I am working in a stressful world. I'm part of that world. And if I'm really honest and accepting of reality, I can see that I actually cause stress. Not to the kids, but to the senior management. And it's not possible for me to teach my subject with integrity and not do that, because we're on a different platform, different world. I'm an artist.
I think it's a huge step, and I think I've never considered that if you work in a stressful situation or there is stress in your world, that you're part of it.
It was very hard for me to accept, very hard. There were times when I actually cried. But what I did feel was the more I look at it, and because I was working in college with learning support and special needs, I could realize the importance of working in a field where you're reducing stress or learning about stress so that you can handle it better. And that was what I started to do as a coach. And once I retired, to build my program. And I started off doing it in workshops which were based around silk painting because I'm a silk paint artist. But there wasn't time in a 3-hour silk painting workshop to get to effectively help people deal with whatever stress they got. And it kind of started stretching and evolved in over probably about 5 years into the two-day program, which was just about to branch out into 5-day retreats when COVID came along.
Oh dear, yeah, the COVID story.
So it took me a while to get it online, but I've now got it online, and I can see with working online new opportunities and possibilities to branch out and create different opportunities and strategies for different situations, you know. And it's exciting because, you know, I get people telling me such moving stories. The one person who's on my program at the moment did it in the first one last summer, and she's a foster mum. And she came across it because I posted something on some Facebook group to do with stress. And she said it made a huge difference. But the first time she did it, it was almost like indigestion because she was having to take on such new concepts and such new exercises and move kind of emotionally outside of her comfort zone with different things. And now she's doing it the second time. She said it's embedding, it's settling, it's making more sense. She's using it with the children in her foster kids, and she's understanding her husband's situation better, which was causing a lot of stress and she didn't know that she could cope with a year ago. Now she's got a more kind of understanding and compassionate attitude and isn't so, she's able to be above when he loses his temper or isn't as supportive as she'd like him to be. She's kind of above that. She's got that emotional space, whereas before it was like, she described it as being in a torrential river, being thrown against the rocks, whereas now she feels she's kind of on a bridge looking at it and able to sort of give command from a safe place. That's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah. I know you've got another commitment, and this could go on for hours. I'm hoping that I can lure you back because...
Oh, I'd love to. I've met you now. I don't feel so sad.
Just as a teaser for our listeners, what was in my notes that we didn't touch on was the silk painting, which you just mentioned, that you're a musician and you have a mnemonic using the word happiness. And then, of course, now you've just mentioned your 7 steps, which is, I believe, a signature program for you.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners, like that's what I'd like to get into in a bit more detail next time, if you'll come back. But tell listeners where they can find you.
Yes, I have a website. It's www.DurgaMata, which is my name, of London. And Durga is a goddess. She's a Hindu goddess. And in the Hindu tradition, when you think of God as mother, there are 2 different aspects. One is Kali, the goddess Kali, and Kali is very strict. And she says, you listen to me and you do this right or else. But Durga is like, they're children. What do you expect? And when I was given the name DurgaMata, my spiritual teacher gave me the name DurgaMata, I was like, oh, that's why I can never get the kids to instantly respond when I ask for silence, or, you know, some teachers can just give people a look and the kids, you know, do what they should. I've never learned that. And I thought, well, if DurgaMata is the quality of my soul, that aspect of God, the patient aspect, endlessly patient, very powerful, but endlessly patient, it's not surprising that I didn't have that kind of snap your fingers and they do it what they're told. We'd have a lot of fun and a lot of affection for each other, but I never got that kind of steely command, which I wished I could on many occasions. But it just is. I mean, my spiritual teacher said, when he gives a spiritual name, it's the qualities that your soul came into the world to develop. It's not who you are now. And for DurgaMata, it's power to fight for God's victory, weapons to defeat evil, and compassion to embrace the whole world. So as one of my friends said, you've got to be busy.
Well, and I just want to say, every time you open your mouth, there's another aspect of you that I'm going like, holy moly. When you write your biography or whatever we call it these days, I will buy the first copy. I just...
Well, I've written 3 books over the last year. And before that, I wrote a book which set out to be quite short and ended up of about 1,000 pages. It's just so many things and so much that for me is interesting. And I need to get an editor because I can write more or less endlessly, but I can't structure it. I don't know. I don't have a logical cell in my brain. You know how people sort of plan a book and this chapter is going to be about this and then we'll do that. And mine doesn't work like that. It's very, very annoying.
Oh my goodness. Well,
so I'm looking for an editor at the moment.
I'm going to put your links in the show notes. So that's good.
Yeah. So it's the 3 W's then, DurgaMataofLondon.com. And there will be other links as well. But on that one, I'm putting a link where you can book a call with me because I do a lot of coaching and I find that the best way to find out what someone's wanting is just have a call. So there's a free hour call, which is not selling.
Oh, yeah.
It's strictly just to get to know you and whether I can help or not.
I'll sign up.
So I'll make sure that that's on my website and working because my first book is on my website, but it's not downloading, as one of my very good friends, Agnes Knowles, let me know the other day.
Yeah. But thank you for sending it to me. I haven't had a chance to really dig in, which maybe was a good thing I didn't have because this would go on for 6 hours instead of an hour or so. Before we close, I want to thank everyone for tuning in this week. Have you noticed that the Two Boomer Women podcast has a new feature, Manly Monday? On the last Monday of the month, starting in May, which was last month now, I'm interviewing a man who has something to say to our demographic. Feel free to share with the men in your life. The guests in the lineup thus far are pretty varied and really interesting, so I encourage you to check it out. And of course, Two Boomer Women Wednesday continues to host amazing women. And as we just said, I hope this particular today amazing woman comes back. Women are also very interesting. June is shaping up to see some more interesting people join me. DurgaMata, thank you so much for joining me today on Two Boomer Women and telling us about part of your journey and your mission to bring more smiles to as many people as possible. And I'll be quite happy if you do sign up the whole world.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I, off the record, can I ask you, can I play you out?
Oh, sure.
This is my pipe. I play pipe
lovely.
and tabor.
Okay, no, this is all on the record. My closing word is always have a good rest of week, and now you are going to play us out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is the English Country Gardens. It was the first song that I learned how to play on the pipe. It's probably too shrill. You might have to turn the volume down. There you are.